think I have a slide further on, but let me point that concept, which is essential for the architect. Architecture, I am an architect. I would say that nobody's perfect, but I am an architect. When we design architecture, it has been 30 years since I have not dealt with architecture, but I started building, like you will. You design generally at a scale 150. You are too young. I am older. We had escalimetros and we had to rotings and all that. Now you do all that with computers, so the scale thing has lost the same meaning. But for us, it was very important. You were drawing at a scale 150, 100, 100, and so on. When you deal with architecture, you design at a scale of 150 normally, and your client is too loud, no? And your client is either a family or it's an institution. When you design square, streets, neighborhood, a TOD, an urban centrality, you generally design at the scale 1/500. You have multiplied by 10, no? And then you start to take into account engineering. Now, obviously in architecture you have to take into account installations and structures, apart from light and space and so on. But you go into engineering, you start to talk with the community association, the local association, the neighbors and so on. When you go into urban planning, you work at the scale 1/5000. And then your clients are going to be the municipality and then the groups of the municipality. No? And generally, you have to introduce economics, industry, economic sectors. So you have to talk sociology, wealth, the different groups and incomes and so on. When you are into metropolitan planning, and you see, we are multiplied by 10 every time. 150, 1/500, 1/5000. When you're into metropolitan planning, you are into 150,000. And then you are not talking to one municipality, you are talking to many municipalities. And you are talking to the states you call secretariats, the ministries, no? Of roads or trains or housing and so on, and to the state. When you go into 1/500,000, you are making national development. India is a continent. You are too large, no? But normally, when we deal with normal countries, Colombia and so on, we deal with 1/500,000. And then you are in economics, in politics, obviously. You are starting to deal with international politics. And the client is obviously national government. No? When you go into continental planning, Latin America, and how the metropolis of Latin America relate to each other, you are into the 1/5 million scale. And your client is going to be the Inter-American Development Bank or the CAF, or the client changes, and the disciplines as well change. And when you are in the world context, you are in the scale 150 million, from 1/5 to 150 million. And then your client is the CIA, the Pentagon, the White House, and the Chinese Communist Politburo. No? But as you see, they all need architects. Each of those scales, they are physical. They all need architects. No? And we are obviously very good at the 150 scale, the 1/500. We start to lose ground in the 1/5000. No? When we do our master plans, we are extremely criticized by everyone else about the master plan. And then when we are dealing with the world, in the World Bank, I have to hide that I am an architect. Because if I say that I am an architect, they won't listen to me. So I have to use economic stuff, econometrics, politology, and that kind of thing to hide that I am an architect. But they need us. And to get into those scales, you need to have the knowledge of all these disciplines that generally in our architectural schools we are not given. Economics. Macroeconomics, politology, international relations, and so on and so on. So I'm telling you this. Normally I don't talk about this because I don't talk to architects. But as you are, as I am an architect, So you can frame that they need us. And as we are not able to know about that and to be involved in those kind of discussions about econometry and so on, at the end, it's all the guys that make those decisions, the economists and the sociologists and blah, 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 away from architecture. And that's the mess we are making. You know? And that's the mess we are living for. But it's not their fault. It's our fault because we are not able to integrate in that kind of. If you want to be the orchestra director, you have to know how every one of the instruments is played to be able to be the orchestra director. If you don't know how the instruments are played, you are never going to be. So my message for you from the beginning is an architectural school cannot teach all that, because then it will teach, I don't know, it will be 20 years of studies, no? But they need us. There is room for us to work there. But to work in that, you have to complete your education with further education of your own. Because obviously, Mumbai might need, I don't know, 5,000 architects, but it only needs 5 metropolitan planners. And you cannot make a career for 5 people. So those 5 people, either they have to study somewhere like New York or London, when there is a lot of people from everywhere in the world learning that, or you have to do that on your own. And so that is one of my important messages. And I have a few more, but it will come. Those who were in the workshop, you will see a lot of the same messages, but there are a few things new. 2 years ago, we did in Mumbai with the European Union and the Maharashtra State and with MMRDA, we did what we call a Brainshop. A Brainshop is a metropolitan intelligence workshop where we get the 50 people from the institutions that make decisions in the metropolis, and they are not only the municipalities and the institutions, the basic institutions, MMRDA, ZITCO, the port, and so on. It's as well the secretaries of the state, the national government, the water, the transport, the private sector, the Chamber of Commerce, the institutions that make decisions that impact the metropolis. We put them all together into a room, we close the doors, and they work for a week on what are their views on the metropolis and how they can consensus projects among themselves. No? And this is putting, obviously, the brains together and linking those brains. And this is some photos of that meeting. And what we do during that week is the first day we talk about what wants Mumbai to be when it will grow up. What wants Mumbai to be in 40 years, in 50 years? What is the role of Mumbai? The second day, we decide to be that, to reach that objective, what do we have to do? And we select 12 projects, and then we make teams out of those 50 people. We make teams of 4 people each team, where there is an administrator, there is an engineer, there is a planner, engineer, an economist, a financial, and then a governance, administration, and so on. So it's really all these different. And then they develop, each of them, one of those projects to give that as a kind of strategic plan, but instead of taking 3 years and $5 million, it takes 1 week and really $30,000. So you really have this result, and that's what I'm going to comment. The first day was very happy because what do you want to be when you're grown up is better to define that by a sentence than by a treaty. No? A child will say, well, I want to be firefighter, no? Or I want to be lawyer, or I want to be army. No? A sentence is better. And the sentence for Mumbai wants to be the capital of the Indian Ocean. Mumbai has to control the economy context from Cape Town to Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City. And that was fine, because it's very clear and is possible. You should never try to be something that you will never be able to be. No? Mumbai wants to be the world capital, wants to compete with New York. Look, let's be sensible and let's see what we are able to be. And that's very sensible and that's very possible. And so the second day we worked into which were the main projects that had to be developed for Mumbai, and I'm going to go through those basic projects. But basically the fact is that Mumbai is growing not very fast, and that is good and that is bad. It's good because if you are not growing very fast, you are able to manage that growth. But it's bad because if you are not growing fast, it's because you are not doing well. The faster you grow is because you are more attractive, you are creating more jobs, people think that it's a great city and they want to come, and then you are overwhelmed by growth. And for instance, Pune is growing at 10% every 10 or 11% every year. Mumbai is growing at 2-3%. You were growing at 3 and now you are growing at 2%, which is not a huge rate. No? It's not a huge rate, but when you grow at 7%, when you grow at 5%, that means that you double the size of your city in 14 years. When you grow at 10%, like Pune, it means that you double the size of your city in 7 years. When you grow at 2-3%, Madrid, when I was in charge of Madrid, was growing at 2%. Not in population. Please. You are growing in population, so that's your basic concern. No? But when you will not grow in population, you will still grow a lot, because growth is not based on population, it's based on wealth. The wealthier you are, the more universities you will have, the more hospitals you will have, the more commercial centers, the more cylinders in the engine of your car, and the smaller your family will be. Developing countries have families of 5. Spain, when I was your age, the average family in Madrid was 5. Now it's 2.5. We have not grown in population. But if you have a family of 5 living in a house, and then 30 years later or 25 years later, you have 2 families of 2.5, you must build another house for that extra family, even if there is no growth of population. So I am telling you things for the next 25 years. So you don't keep it in your subconscious, and then when it will happen, you will react. So Madrid was growing not in population terms, but was growing by 2.5% every year in terms of urban land. No? And that meant that every 20 years, we were growing 50%. Because it's not 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, it's 2 multiplied by 0.2 multiplied by 0.2, so it's an exponential, it's a geometrical curve. No? So Mumbai, by 2%, 2.5% growth, every year, and you are a metropolis of 23 million inhabitants, Madrid is a small metropolis of 7 million, you need every year 10 square kilometers of land. And there is, I am going beyond the slides to frame what is the message. No? 10 square kilometers of land is all the historical center of Mumbai, from coast to coast, and from almost the airport to the Taj Mahal, to the Indian Gate. No? So it's a huge amount of land. And if you don't produce that amount of land, it's going to happen anyway. But it's going to happen uncontrolled, in the wrong positions, in the wrong locations, and if we do things wrong afterwards, solving the problems we have created costs between 3 and 9 times more than doing things right from the beginning. So if we say, we don't have things to do, we don't have money to things right. Well, if you don't have money to do things right, in 20 years' time, you will have less money to do things right that will cost 3 times to 9 times more than doing it right from the beginning. And those figures are from the UN Habitat and from the World Bank. So the responsibility is really to do things right, and it's not expensive to do things right. We only need collective intelligence to do things right, and collective intelligence is not a question of money, it's a question of intelligence. So the challenge is huge, and really Mumbai is growing fast, not as fast as other cities, but growing very fast. And obviously, if you are growing by 100%, 7% every year, 100% every 14 years, imagine you had to build Mumbai in 14 years. or Paris in 14 years, or London, because if you double, you have to build what is already built, you have to build it. Imagine Paris took 2,000 years and London as well, no? And so on. So imagine doing that instead of 2,000 years, doing that in 14 years. That is impossible. It looks impossible. It is possible because it is happening, but it is happening under no control, leaving a mess behind us. And politicians, any politician around? I have been in politics, no? So I know I was a very bad politician, so that's why I'm not anymore in politics. No? But I know how politicians think, no? And politicians say, well, this is a challenge I cannot address, so you take your civil servant, planner, to say, fake the figures, not to show the challenge, and so we will say that we are being able to create 400 social affordable houses every year and so on and so on. When 400, when what is needed is 40,000, no? And we will sell that, and it's the next politician that will have to care about the problem, and let's just go to the next election and forget about that, and we leave it to them. I have been in politics, so I know how it is. Anyway, so Mumbai, now, Mumbai in 1947 made the right decision to jump the bay, to make Navi Mumbai, Zitco, and so on, in 1947, 60 years ago, no, 62 years ago. And now it is the time to make the decision to make the next jump, no, to the next valley behind Navi Mumbai, what I call Navi Mumbai. No? So really you have to make, because the amount, every year you have 400,000 people that come to live in Metropolitan Mumbai. 400,000. 400,000 people is 100,000 families. Every year you have to make 100,000 dwellings in the right location. And obviously the right location is not, what was the figure? 30,000 people per square kilometer, no, Mumbai. There is a limit of quality and so on. You cannot have 30,000 people living because you need hospitals, parks, and places. So really you have to expand Mumbai in that kind of dimension because it is our duty to respond. So in the Metropolitan Planning workshop, Metropolitan Intelligence, what we saw is that Mumbai has a set of parallel lines because metropolises are metropolises because they are always located in a strategic position, in a strategic location. Have you done town planning? You maybe have come across something called the central place theory, no? A German guy in 1937 that said that when you have a featureless plain and you throw their cities and villages, they locate themselves in an hexagonal pattern, no? Because the big one has around some peripheral ones, and they organize themselves in an hexagonal pattern. The main issue there is that it has to be a featureless plane, you know? A plane that has no geographic characteristic, and then the mathematical geometrical rule applies. But when you have a metropolis, the metropolis is a metropolis because they are controlling the passage between two ecosystems. That's why it is a metropolis. Mumbai is extremely evident, no? But New York is as well. New York was the exit of of all the Mississippi River production through the Central Lake down to a canal they made in 1830, the Air Canal. And so it was the gateway to all the goods of America to Europe and vice versa, all the goods of America. And that's why New York became New York and then a financial center. And even if now the Air Canal is not useful, they are still the financial center of the world. London is London because when Julius Caesar, a Latin, decided to invade England, he had to make a bridge, and that bridge had to be a pontoon bridge. No? Instead of being soundly cimented, it was a pontoon bridge. And you cannot make a pontoon bridge when you have the tides that go up and down that will break the bridge, and then you will end up without a bridge after a week. So he had to find the place where the ties went to London. That was now the ties go to Richmond, which is 30 miles, because England is sinking, and it's not literary, it's physical. England is sinking. And we see that with the Brexit, no? In the Ice Age, all England was under ice. There were 2 kilometers of ice on top of England. When they made the metro that you are doing in Mumbai, no? When they made the metro in England, in Pimlico, they found a moraine of a glacier. No? Pimlico is where the Tate Gallery is a moraine of a glacier. So it was ice. So, Scotland was lower and England was higher. And since 8,000 years, because that's what happened in 8,000 years, you could walk to England from the continent 8,000 years ago. Scotland is going up and England is sinking. So 2,000 years ago, with Julius Caesar, the ties went to London, and now the ties go 30 kilometers, and they had to build the Greenwich Barrage, and now with the climate change, they have to build a larger one and so on. So London is London because a strategic position in the Thames that allowed Caesar to go. Paris is Paris because in the Seine, there were 2 islands in the middle of the river, and when the Romans had to invade Germany, it's much easier to make 2 small bridges than 1 big one, and so on. And I could go on with all the metropolis of the world, and obviously you are Mumbai because you are a beautiful bay, and that's the way of accessing India in a protected area. So all the metropolis are always related to generally to an interface between 2 ecosystems, the sea and the land, the 2 sides of the river, the passage among mountains and reaching a valley, and 2 ecosystems always are separate. The line of 2 ecosystems are always a straight line. The river might do some things like that, but at the end it's a straight line. So metropolis are always directed by a straight line that defines the topography. So they are never hexagonal situations. They are always with one direction and then the perpendicular, because that direction creates a gradient, you know, parallel directions, and then the perpendicular to that. So metropolis are never hexagonal. Metropolis are always linear and reticular. And that's the case of Mumbai. And then you see the line of the coast, the line of the hills, we will see that later on, the lines of the coastal hills, the line of the bay, the Navi Mumbai, the coast again, the other hills, the valley and so on until the Indian plateau. So it's parallel lines that are north-south, and what you have to do is to link those parallel lines in the green. You have to make that link, and that link generally is done through the waterways, the rivers, which are perpendicular to the coast and so on, and you build up a continuous system out of the green. The metropolises, you will see, metropolitan planning has nothing to do with urban planning. Forget all you know about urban planning and think in a different way. And this is one of the ways. In metropolitan planning, there are 5 systems that you have to integrate. One is environment, the other is transport. We call this green infrastructure, gray infrastructure, housing, productive activities, and social facilities. That's your job, integrating those 5 systems. But out of those 5 systems, 2 of them are continuous systems, and 3 are discontinuous. The continuous systems are the green infrastructure and the gray infrastructure. You cannot have a kilometer of train, then nothing, then another kilometer of train. The train has to go through. When you arrive to the station, you have to get down and take a bus or a taxi or a bicycle or the last mile or whatever. So it's a continuous system, you know, that has to be linked together. And the green as well, the biodiversity, the animals, the birds fly, but the animals that go from one system to the other have to be able to feed all that biology and they have to be able to flow from one green, from the very big national parks to the regional parks, to the peri-metropolitan parks, to the metropolitan parks, to the peri-urban parks, to the urban parks, and even to your street if you are able to. And that's why when you go in northern European cities or in Washington, D.C., you're driving with your car and you find a deer in the middle of your street because that deer has been able to fly, to walk from the lot. So those two systems are continuous. The other three, housing, economic activities, and social facilities, they are systems because a hospital system is a system, but they don't need to be all together. You know? They can be scattered. So when you are doing metropolitan planning, the main thing is how to coordinate the two continuous systems, green and gray, that they are always in conflict because when you have, I generally don't say these things for people which are not architects because they don't understand space. But you understand space. When you have two continuous systems and you put that into the map, immediately they conflict. And then you have to solve those conflicts. And that is the role of the spatial planner, the architect, to respond. And there are many tricks. I'm not going to get into that because that will be a course of 7 years. But you have to, and once you have solved that, the other three discontinuous is very easy because you can move the hospital, you can move the commercial center, you can move the housing, and so on and so on. So basically, is that. So you see, you have to link all these green spaces together. You have protection in Mumbai, but it's scattered protection, and you really must link all together. Normally, you link that through the waterways, which are perpendicular to the main lines of the metropolis, and then that's the way of linking. No? And then with the network of roads and the network of trains, again, you have parallel lines. It's not making circles around a metropolis, because at the end, those circles are creating a monocentric metropolis. And when you create a monocentric metropolis, what you are fostering is the congestion of that center. No? The circles were invented by a guy called Otto Wagner in 1912. He invented the Großstädte in Vienna, but that was a century and a few years ago. No? And since engineers, civil engineers, now I'm going to go against the civil engineers. And since 1912, Otto Wagner, he was an architect. He was a very good architect, but a bad planner. You are good at one scale, but you are not good at the next scale. We were talking on the car. It's like the writers. You are a good poet, but you are not a good novelist. You might be a good novelist, but you are not a good essayist. You are not a good theater writer. You have to understand what are your limitations, where are you good at. Otto Wagner, Vienna in 1912, he said, well, Vienna is growing, let's make circles around Vienna. He made the project of the Großstädte of Vienna. And since the civil engineers have been copying that, and whenever there is a congestion in a metropolis, they make another circle, and that becomes an onion ring, and all with a monocentric, the congestion, everyone trying to come to the center, all the streets and roads coming to the center congested, and then the whole thing is a mess. And metropolis don't work like that, so change your brain, change your state of mind, and metropolis work playing with those lines which are parallel and perpendicular, which are really the ones that create the direction, the directrix and the generatrix of the metropolis, and that you do have in Mumbai. I was very happy to see that this result from 2 years ago has been taken on by MMRDA, and they have revised the gray infrastructure plan of Mumbai, and they have introduced this vision. Then you have the housing, and the housing in a metropolis has to be linked to the center by commuter rail. BRTs are not enough. BRTs, you know, is the articulated buses. BRTs is an urban solution, is not a metropolitan one. Even the metro is not a metropolitan solution, is an urban one. The metropolitan solutions is the rail. And you have a wonderful rail network in Mumbai that you are using very well. That's why Mumbai works better than many other metropolises in India and around the world. But you have to expand those rail tracks, or at least the rail service. And the way a metropolis works is polycentric. You have different centers, and each of those centers have to play a different role. And so you have to create those centralities and give them a different role to each of those centralities. That is the basic of a metropolis. So you have those possible centralities in the next valley. This is Navi Mumbai. This is Navi Mumbai. And you have there the possibility of creating something like room for 2 million people. Navi Mumbai is 1,100,000. So you have the possibility there to create 2 Navi Mumbais and linked by train and not linked by car and so on. So that is your possibility. And then the productive activities, you have the port that is going to move. It's already moving. But you know, to be wealthy, you have to add value to the products you produce. That's the basic of wealth. The Italians, Milan, they buy a piece of fabric from wherever, that the value of the fabric is $10, and Versace makes a skirt for girls, and the value of the skirt is $4,000. From 10 to 4,000. That is innovation, that is creativity, and that is added value. So to reach the level of the developed countries, what you have to do is add value. And things that have a lot of value added, they don't take the boat, they take the plane. Things which have a lot of kilos and very little value, the iron, the steel, the coke, carbon, coal, and so on, they go by boat because there is a lot of kilos, but a computer doesn't go by boat. $2,000, 1 kilo, you take the plane. So the future of Mumbai, if you want to be New York, no, or you want to be Beijing, it is the plane. And so the port of Mumbai, that's fine. It's not bad to have a good port and so on and so on. But it's going to be the airport, future of Mumbai. And that airport is not enough. If Mumbai wants to be the capital of the Indian Ocean, you need to have an airport for 150 million passengers. And each runway can only hold 30 million, 40 million. You have an airport with just one runway in the center of Mumbai. It is exceptional. You have 40 million passengers because you use it 24 hours a day, and it's very crowded, and you take one plane lands after the other. There is risk there. There is lack of security, and it's overcrowded. Normally, a runway is 20 to 30 million passengers, and you are building an airport with 2 runways. So your limit is going to be 60 million or 70 million, and you need 150 million. That kind of airport is 6 runways. And you have not decided, and when you are growing at 7%, Madrid is growing at 11% annual. This number of figures will multiply every 10 years, so you really must think about it. Where to put the next airport when this one not only is going to be congested, but it's going to be flooded. Because the climate change, the sea level is going to go up, and that area is going to be flooded. No? But for the next 20 years, you have this airport, so let's make the best use of it. No? It's better to have an airport for 20 years and then get rid of it afterwards than not have an airport, because you have lost then your position in the world. And I was telling this at lunchtime, we were having a discussion. There is a wonderful Argentinian sentence that says that a crocodile that gets to sleep becomes a handbag. That means that you have to take the right decision in the right moment, because if you don't take it, someone else is going to take it for you. And then you become a secondary metropolis in the world. So if you don't take the right decision at the right moment, so that's why it's better to have a wrong airport than not to have an airport at all. So that's good. And an airport, the amortization of the airport, the investments of airports are extremely efficient. In a few years, the benefit of having an airport is but that airport is the exit of all the added value produced in your economy if you become a developed economy. And that added value can be produced in that valley of Navi Mumbai, that I call it as well Saraswati Valley, because it's Silicon Valley, it's the knowledge valley of Mumbai there, and you have there a lot of land, something like 40 square kilometers of land for productive activities, for industries, for research, laboratories, and so on. That is 400,000 jobs. 40 square kilometers, 100 jobs per hectare, that's 400,000 jobs. So that was the proposal 2 years ago of the economic group. So at the end, you have this kind of diagram. I will go there later on because we are the only ones able to do that kind of diagram. We architects are the only ones able to understand space and to make a diagram, abstract diagram of that space. So I will go later on into this diagram. This is Mumbai, and then immediately in that kind of diagram, you see what is missing. Because we understand the diagram, we have made the diagram, we understand space, and you see what's missing. And it's obvious that Mumbai, what is missing is an east-west green connection of the different green spaces. It is necessary the expansion, the urban expansion of that Navi Valley with all these urban centralities and TODs. The economic positioning of Mumbai in the world and in the ocean and the Indian Ocean, which is the link to the airport and the development of the strategies, industrial and tertiary and production of research and so on. And instead of playing north-south, what Mumbai has to play is east-west, creating the transfers between all these parallel lines among themselves. Integrating transport and then coordinating the metro economy and the governments. That's more of a politology, and that's more of an institutional integration that now is a bit disintegrated. So you immediately see this kind of diagram, what you have to do. And I was very happy to see that MMRDA in the last 2 years took on these proposals, and they have made a comprehensive traffic studies that before, 2 years ago, the proposal was this kind of black line that was the invention of one of the secretaries of transport that say, well, let's make a highway there. And they have taken over a proposal which is consistent and really is the skeleton of the metropolis, and it works. So I was very happy and I congratulate. All these projects are like cherries. No? You take one cherry and the other cherries come along. No? All these projects are integrated. You cannot make one if you don't make the other. No? Because they really address the whole problem of sociology, of economics, of physical, of governance, of environment, and so on. What you can do is select from which cherry you are going to pick up first. But once you pick one of the cherries, the others come. And you must realize that you have to do all of them. But they will come as a natural way. Once you do the train, then you need the housing. Once you do the housing, then you need the jobs. You do need the jobs, that's all. So it all goes together, and it works. And what I suggest is to think out of the box. Don't think, the problems of Mumbai are not solved in Mumbai. They are solved outside Mumbai, because Mumbai is already a metropolis. So you don't solve the problems of Mumbai in the municipality of Mumbai. They are solved in the general context. So you know the quiz, no? You have nine points, you have full lines, and how do you link them? There is always going to be one loss. It's only when you think out of the box, you go out of those 9 points, is you can link them. No? So think out of the box, and Mumbai needs to take the cork out of the champagne, because Mumbai is under pressure. And if you still try to solve things within Mumbai, you are not going to be able to solve it. So that's why you have to think big and think in another direction. So this is the examples of New York, London, Paris, what I said before, that a metropolis is a metropolis because it has a directionality and a transversality, generatrix. And then there are only 4 types of metropolises. The metropolis which are coasts, and Mumbai is one of them, New York, Mumbai, Accra, Karachi, Surat. No? the metropolis, which is a river, Paris, London, New Delhi. The metropolis, which is a pass, Bogota, Col, Madrid, Nairobi, Tehran. And the metropolis, which is a valley, Medellin, Quito, Santiago. So you are in this solution, and it's very clear, very easy how to respond to that kind of solution. But what we are doing really all around the world is breaking this kind of concept of circular concept of Otto Wagner for a year and the civil service. No? We have many centers that dialogue among them, and you have to realize what is the role of each center and how to provide the basis for that role. We have a problem when the metropolis is circular because of something in economy, which is called economies of scale. The more you have, the more you will have. So the wealthy people live here because that land is the most expensive land because it has most infrastructure. So to make it more productive, you have to invest more there. And the poor people live around and you don't invest there because it's not effective, and you care about social equity, and obviously you have to invest, but you are not very keen on investing there, no? Because it's a lot of land and there is very low. And that is a basic dichotomy of the politicians, of the government. You have a limited budget, and you have to decide if you are going to invest in economic productivity and efficiency or in social equity. And there is no technical solution for that balance. If you want to promote the economy, you have to concentrate investment. If you want to promote social equity, you have to disperse investment. No? And what happens is that as there is no technical solution of that, there are many town planners that say, I know my solution and I want to impose it on everyone else in this society and so on. No. It's us as voters that we have to decide for that. So that's why generally in politics we have a party that says my priority is social equity, and other party that says my priority is economic efficiency. And the population, in a different historical moment, there is one priority and the other, and that's why the population either votes for a party that is proposing social equity or is proposing that. But it's not a technical solution. It's a political solution that we have to do. So this creates that dichotomy. Either you invest here or you invest there, economic activity, productivity, social facility, and this way you break that kind of antagonism. You cannot break it completely. There is always going to be this alternative, this dichotomy, but at least you can create a polycentric. The word for metropolises is polycentrism. No? You create polycentric metropolises that dialogue among them, cluster activities of economics and so on, and in between, you can have the different social groups and the different social facilities and so on. So you are decongesting the metropolis, and you are producing a metropolis which is more efficient because it doesn't have to play with that dichotomy. And what we say is that we are not playing dots anymore in a metropolis, we are playing chess. It's not a matter of all trying to be in the center because it takes you 2 hours and a half to go to the center. So the wealthy guys can pay for an apartment in the center and then they are there. He's not anymore trying to be in the center playing dots. He's playing chess. Everyone has to understand what is his role, no? And one will be queen and the other will be king. The king is always the historical center, which gives the sense of place to the metropolis. But rooks and knights and so on and so on. So we are playing chess. And in chess, every one of those pieces have a different role, and they have to understand the role they have to play. When I was in Madrid, I had to coordinate and control 180 maids, no? And they all wanted to be queens. But obviously, if you want to be queen, you want an international airport, you want an international university, you want a stadium, an Olympic stadium, and so on and so on. And you are a village of 5,000 inhabitants with a budget of $2 per capita, $2 per person in a year. Try to be what you can be. Try to understand what is your role in society and play that role the best you can. No? And don't try to have an ambition which is beyond your capacity. So everyone has to understand the role, And this is the case of the game of Madrid, where the role of everyone. I have not done the one of Mumbai. I would love to. I don't know enough about Mumbai, but I have done many of those. And with someone that knows Mumbai, we can put the queen, the king, and so on, so on, and we can make a photo, and that will be interesting. Mumbai metropolis, the diagram. You must understand, as I mentioned before, you have the coast, you have the city, you have the coastal hills, you have the bay, you have Navi Mumbai, you have the Bay Hills, you have the Navi Mumbai, you have the Plateau foothills, and then you have the Indian Plateau. You see is perpendicular lines, north-south, that go like that, and what you have is to connect that in east-west way to make a system and not disaggregated units. And then Mumbai plays an important role in, obviously, essential role in India. I'm not going to go. Well, later I will go into India, and you have these two diagonals to New Delhi and to Bangalore and to Chennai and to Hyderabad, no? Which break the reticula of India. As you see, these red lines, they are following the roads that already existed. Our antecessors were not stupid, and they have 5,000 years to make a decision. Not like us, we have only 6 months to make that decision. So they could play with the trial and error, and they understood the territory, and they knew where to put the cities, and they knew something that we have lost since. So you see, I am only reading what is already there, no? The roads that were put there by the previous generations, and that gives you the sense of the structure of the place. And then you have to, that's the DNA of the region, and you have to play with that DNA. And you as architects know perfectly well that you have to make a project that fits into the DNA of the location of that project. That's the basic architecture. So you have two diagonals which are related to a larger scale economic position of the Ganges Valley and so on and so on. And then as you have the bay, those two diagonals, instead of going directly to Mumbai, because they did not have the capacity to make a bridge across the bay, they go to Thane in a kind of squeeze diagonal. And that is the basic structure. And so once you had the money and the engineering capacity, you made the bridge. So you have these 3 points of Mumbai structure. And then you have other centers that have to play each of them a different role. I'm not going to get into that, but every one of them has to understand the role. When I received the mayors in my office, I told them, your role is to be a knight, no? Or your role is to be a bishop, or your role is... And I used to go to the wall. I had this game of chess in the wall and so on, and I took the piece and I gave it to him. So he was going back to his municipality, looking at the piece and hating me because I was defining the role for him. I used to tell them, if you want to play another role, you are the mayor. You can play whatever role you want. But if you want to be a queen, you are going to miss the whole thing, and you are going to spoil the budget of your people. So be reasonable and try to play the role that you can play. But it was not forcing them. That's essential in metropolis. Completely different to cities. In a city, you have a mayor, you have deputy mayors, you have the directors of the departments, you have the services, you have the population. Or in a pyramid or in a circle. So it's a unitary system. And there, what is essential is the bottom-up, top-down dialogue. You have to listen to the population, you have to respond, you have to make proposals, they have to accept it. It's a bottom-up, top-down. In a metropolis, nothing to do with that. Nothing, forget it. In a metropolis is 18 or 100 municipalities, is the different secretaries, ministries of the state, is the water agency, is the power agency, and each of them in a democracy and in a non-democracy, each of them have their own competences. And you cannot force someone to do something against his will if they are the competences. So it's not a unitary system. It's a system, we will see that later, is a matrix system where every one of them, all these institutions have to be in the row and in the columns, and they have to talk, all of them, and the results have to be public, so a third institution can make the decisions referring to what the other two have done. So the way of governance of a metropolis has nothing to do. And if you are an architect, that we have been doing that wrong for 40 years. We architects that are town planners, we say, well, as I have done the master plan of the city, I will do the master plan of the metropolis like the plan of the city, but in a larger scale. Well, you fuck it. No? You make it wrong because the approach is completely different, and you cannot make, and you should not make a regulatory plan. It's fine that a master plan has to tell every plot what is the rights and the duties and what they have to do. But when you are in a metropolis, that's not your role, and the approach to planning is completely different. And if you try to do an urban master plan in a metropolitan scale, you are missing the point. Anyway, each of those metropolis has cities, and this is the diagram. You say that the map is still under there, no? And you architects are the only ones who understand that. And then you take the Google map underneath, and this is the diagram. And that immediately you see what is missing. This is missing, this is missing, that is missing. You immediately see what is missing. And the usefulness of this kind of diagram, and you understand that because you're architects, is that if the reality is a set of bottoms, no, and you put them together, our knowledge, our capacity of abstraction is the arithmetics. You say 4 plus 2 equals 6, and that's the power of us when we understand the territory in an abstract way through this kind of diagrammatic approach. And in a metropolis, different from a city, in a city you define every one of the plots, and you can say this is the hospital, and this is going to be residential, and this is going to be the station, and so on. In a metropolis, you cannot control every plot in a metropolis because you are dealing with a state, a size. So what you do is metropolitan acupuncture. What you do in a metropolis is understand how the body of the metropolis works, and then you put the needle in a place that is going to have an effect in the whole metropolis in the way you want that effect to be. But obviously, to put the acupuncture, put the needle in the right place, you have to have the acupuncture chart. You must know what is the role of each of those points, and that is what that diagram does. This is the role. These are the main international centers. These are the secondary centers, and so on. And only if you have a metropolitan acupuncture chart, you will know where to put the needle. Because if you don't have the metropolitan chart, this is a guy, Jaime Lerner, the mayor of Curitiba. You know that Curitiba has been an example worldwide. And as you see, he's making urban acupuncture, no? But apply that to metropolitan acupuncture. You have. And if you don't have the acupuncture chart, then what you are having is the strategy of the mosquito. Where is there a bit of skin open, so I will put my needle, I will suck all the blood I can, and I will go somewhere else to suck next blood. And I'm not talking about developers. Who is a developer? Great. I am talking as well about a mayor, no? That says, well, we have money to make a hospital, no? John, where do we put the hospital? Well, Mr. Mayor, we have here a plot of land, we don't know what to do with it, let's put it there. That's the mosquito strategy of not understanding what the metropolis and that plot might be for the vocation of that plot might be completely different. So you only can put a needle if you have the metropolitan chart. No? And obviously, every metropolis is different. And obviously, every metropolis has a different acupuncture chart. No? Sometimes I have problem with the veal and with the pork, but let's not have any problem. So every metropolis has a different acupuncture chart, and here you have 9 metropolises around the world, but I can show you 130, no? And you have to understand that. By the way, this is Mumbai, no? But this is Cairo, that is Mexico, this is Tehran, this is Istanbul, this is Maputo. In Mozambique, this is Nairobi in Kenya, this is Bogota in Colombia, and this is Abuja in Nigeria. No? And then you immediately see what is missing, no? Architects. A roof truss, no? In a roof truss is what we used to call an isostatic structure. You have all done that, no? An isostatic structure is where every bar and every knot is necessary, because if you take any bar or any knot, the whole thing falls. So you have the isostatic structure. These are the isostatic structures of the metropolis. So if there is a bar or a knot which is missing, your next project is to design that bar and to design that knot. And that's what we do in the Milano Polytechnic workshops that we were talking before. We decide which is missing, and then a set of Italian and new students design those knots. And as it is the obvious solution of the metropolis, is only a question of waiting time for the public authorities to realize that that is a need and to do it. So if you have collective intelligence, the decision will be made in 4 years, and if you don't have collective intelligence, the decision will take 20 years. But at the end, it will be made because it's obvious that that is needed in a metropolis. So those are examples. It's like you have an emoji, no, and an eye is missing. You say, well, I have to draw the eye. No? And this is an example. This is Santiago de Chile, and 20 years ago, I told them, obviously, you need a train here, and they have built the train. And the train is now running because it was the obvious solution. You should say things which are obvious and not try to invent things which are not. No? We architects have difficulties with that, but anyway. And these are examples of, there are 16 there, but there are 20 examples of obvious things that have been built or are in the process of being built. You know? And I am not going to get into all that. No? Here is the slide about the different scales. 150, 1,500, 1,500, 150,000. These are the disciplines: geopolitics, regional, national development, metropolitan planning, urban design, and so on. And this is knowledge areas, academic disciplines, and so on. No? So I come back to my first message. And for instance, this kind of scales work in transport. In every one of those sectors, in transport, you have international transport, which is obviously the plane, and that's the scale of the world, 150 million. Then you have the national, which are the high-speed trains, which, and our job as a metropolitan planner is not only to be good at that level, which is ours, but to dialogue with the other levels. And whenever you are doing a project in a metropolitan dimension, you are linked to the other levels. For instance, I was working in an area close to the mouth of the Panama Canal, and we were dealing with geopolitics because the Chinese were interested in controlling that land because it was the entrance to the Panama Canal, which is controlled by the United States. So when you are designing something or making a decision, you have to think about the all scales, and in this case, the scale more important was the 150 million. It was the geopolitics of the world. And you as architects have to understand all these scales to be able to integrate those processes. So you have the different scales: metropolitan, urban. This is the master plan, and then the urban design of the TODs, the urban centrality. And obviously the diagrams is to understand that it works, and then you make the project specific, which is the job of the architect. You are going to have an enormous impact on climate change. And I have not heard enough discussions about climate change. And in Mumbai, it's going to be disastrous. As you know, the Paris Agreement says that we should target 2 degrees increase, but that will mean that we stop today, no, a year ago, 2 years ago, to stop all emissions. And we are not going to stop all emissions because we are not intelligent enough to understand that. So it's going to go on. And I have been discussing with professors of MIT and Harvard and so on. They say that we are going probably go not 2 degrees, but 3 and 4 degrees above actual level. No? And with 3 degrees, that was the situation of the world 130,000 years ago. You know, we were at that kind of level. And then the sea water was 6 meters above the actual sea level. So if we don't go into 4 degrees, but we go into 3 degrees, instead of 6 meters, it's going to be 4 meters. And maybe we, the guys with white hair, we won't see that, but you, the guys with brown hair, you will see that. And either you start thinking about that, or it's going to be a mess. I don't have a slide, but when you have to deal with climate change, you have only 3 ways of dealing with climate change. You either confront it, you either adapt, or you run away. And you take the decision depending on the amount of investment that you already have in that area. For instance, London. The amount of investment is so huge that they make a barrier in Greenwich, and now they are making a larger barrier. That is confrontation. Adaptation, Kitty Hawk in America, or villages in Italy and so on. In Kitty Hawk, every 40 years they have a flood, and the water goes into the lagoon and takes away all the houses and so on. So they decided to build the houses on stilts. So they park under the house, and they have the streets and the commercial centers and so on. And once the water comes, they run away with the car. The water comes, the water goes. They paint the stilts again, and they park, and the house has not been touched. So that is adaptation. And running away is the Filipino village that has very little investment. So they decide to build that village 300 meters higher, and it will not be affected. So, but there are only 3 ways. And that has been studied by the biologists and so on. I'm not going to get into that. So let's not invent other. Confrontation, adaptation, and so on. Obviously, the most intelligent one is adaptation. But sometimes you cannot, because if you have a lot of investment, you have to protect it. And you have it. Anyway, Mumbai is in a terrible situation because all this is going to be flooded. You can only think, and I thought, sorry for this line, it should be here, no? You can only think about a barrier here, a barrier there, in the way to Thane, and a barrier there, that will protect all these areas. So, which now is there, it will only be saved if you build a barrier that will, because that is a sensible investment. What you cannot build is a barrier here, no? That will be incredible, no? So you have to start discussing climate change, the impact, and what are you going to do with it, because it's going to be extremely important. In other places, it's not going to be so important. In Madrid is going to become like Phoenix. Phoenix is going to become like the Sahara. It's just a matter of change of water. We have the problem of water, the problem of heat, and so on. But in your case, it's really the sea invading the land in a very... This is the project of MMRBA, DA, which is fine, is great. And working on this project, what I did is completing it. These dotted lines have not been thought of by MMRDA, and I think they should, because the more reticular, why the chess game is more efficient than the dot game. Because in the dot game, when you have to go from one place to the other, you only have the radial road. If the radial road collapses, all the feeding routes to the radial road collapse. So it's what we call equilibrium, an unstable equilibrium. No? Unstable equilibrium is when you have a ball like this with a small ball on the top. It is in the center, it's in equilibrium. But if it runs a millimeter, it falls. And the chess game is a stable equilibrium. It's having the ball like this. You have the small ball in the center. You move it a millimeter, it comes back. So the chess game between 2 points, you have many possible trips. You have the 2 hypotenuses, the other 2. If any segment becomes collapsed, you have the parallel segments to take that. And so there are many. So it comes back to the equilibrium by its own. And this is not us who have invented that. It was invented by the Greeks. It was invented by the Romans. It was invented 3,000 years ago. No? And it works much better. So, but in that case, if you have a collapse in any, you have to have the parallel one. So this is missing. And this is my suggestion to MRDA for the next step. This is the size of the amount of land that you have to make every year. And as you see, it's the whole of Mumbai that you have to produce every year, and you are not producing it. So the result is more slum, more congestion, more increase of density, and so on. So as you see, you already have that train line, and you can have those centralities and those areas of housing development, and then jobs and industrial development. You already have the solution there. It's just a matter of having the collective intelligence from the institutions and the organism involved in that to make those decisions. And the further extension, and you see each bud means balanced urban development unit. No? Each bud is 5 square kilometers with a density of 80 dwellings per hectare, which is the maximum density that we as Europeans accept, is 20,000 inhabitants per square kilometers. That unit is 25,000 inhabitants. And so the total expansion is for 2 million inhabitants, which is the double of actual Navi. And if Navi has been for the last 60 years, you have for a century and a half with this. I'm joking. This only will provide a solution for 8 years to the amount of numbers that you need. And then what I call the Saraswati Valley, which is the industries never have to be inside the cities. The industries have to be on the highways in the periphery, because you must avoid heavy trucks, heavy loads in the city, because it congests the streets and is dangerous. So industries, heavy industries, no. You need as well the train, because the coal and the steel and so on comes by train. But industries which produce added value products, they never use the train. They use the truck and the airplane. So you must produce the industries along the highways, and they serve as a buffer zone of the impact of the highways on the cities, and you have to have green areas that flow in between and do not allow the emergence of these units, which is then the conurbation, and a conurbation is the metastasis of the metropolis, and it has to be avoided. And this is 8 examples of those units that are being built, and as you see, every one of them is different, and they are done by architects, so you have a lot of jobs and work to do. Well, imagine, if we have to double Mumbai in 20 years, you have a lot of work to do. No? So, and these are figures. How long does it take? Planning by MLDA, selection of location of commuter stations. In 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, you can say these stations have to be here, there. A draft of the balanced urban development units, 2 months. Definition of the required land at the same time as the 2 months. Management of CITCO, land property research, pre-feasibility, investment, rail, the finance, and so on. In 3 years and a half, you can start the issue and you can have results. No? Obviously, this is the ideal world, and we don't live in an ideal world, but at least don't make it 35 years. Make it 7 or make it 10. No? But you see, that is, and the cost of it, you need for the improvement of the rail, you already have the rail, so it's improvement of the rails and rolling stock, that's 5 million per kilometer, so it's $120 million. The multimodal station, 5 million each station, 25, the TODs and so on. You need $200 million, and including the financial costs, and if you share that, you distribute that among the amount of houses of the first phase, which is very basic, it's $600 per dwelling, which is really nothing, and financially very sensible, so it can work very well. No? This is made in half an hour in a paper handkerchief. So that has to be made seriously, and a feasible study. But you do this as an architect, and you see that things fit. And then there will come the economists, the engineers that will calculate the cost, real cost of the concrete and so on, and they will tell you, you were wrong by 20%. All right, no problem. If you have benefits of 1,000%, you don't mind being wrong 20%. And when you are doing metropolitan planning, and when you are forecasting for the future, you must understand that you are not doing urban planning. When you are doing urban planning, you are forecasting for 8 years. And you have to be very precise, and then if you make mistakes, it's very dangerous because you are going to make the investment. When you are forecasting for planning, you are shooting a bullet. And if you don't, can we have this somewhere else? And, all right. In a bullet, you have to be very precise because the bullet, once it's out of the gun, you cannot change the direction of the bullet. When you are doing metropolitan planning, you are not throwing a bullet. You are shooting a missile. And the missile doesn't matter if you are 20 degrees higher or lower, because the missile will look for the target and will hit the target in the last moment. When you are doing metropolitan planning, even if we are technically doing it, you are shooting a missile. So you must, doesn't matter if you are wrong 20%, because you will have the tools of calibration, which is making those figures right to hit the target. So it's a completely different approach. No? So town planners that want to make metropolitan planning, say no, you cannot. No? You have to have a completely different. Anyway, when you are forecasting in the next 40 years, you can only be sure of something. That is, you are going to be wrong. So instead of trying to be, a system is more perfect if you can correct the errors. All systems have errors. So if the system introduces the possibility of correcting the errors, that system is more perfect than any other system that tries to avoid errors. And that's the point when you're doing metropolitan planning. So India, 1 hour and a half. We still have 1 hour and a half. No? So this is the population of India that you all know. 3 minutes. No. This is the population of India. And obviously, that population gives you the structure of India. No? Where is the population? Tells you the diagram of India. No? And even this is the federal government has made this kind of diagrams with the main lines of the roads and the rails and so on and so on. And you can synthesize. And this cannot be done by engineers. It has to be you, architects, to do that. And so this is the diagram of metropolitan India. Every small square is 1 million inhabitants. No? So New Delhi, Mumbai, Pune, Surat, and so on and so on. So you see immediately the structure of it. Is it useful? You will see that it's useful. Because once you have the structure, all right. Metropolises are as powerful as nations. You don't have to learn this by heart. No? But you see the red lines are metropolises, and the black ones are nations. And you see that if metropolis were nations, number 14 will be Tokyo, number 15 New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, London, Paris. Metropolis are as powerful as nations, and this is the 10 first powerful territories in the world, and 46 are nations. If I take the next 100, something like 75 will be nations. No? So we are really the future of the world in terms of power. No? And the future of the nations in the world is going to be represented by the power of their metropolises. There are nations which are obvious. No? Manila is 66% of the GDP of the Philippines. If Manila doesn't work, the Philippines don't work. No? Cairo is 60% of the GDP of Egypt. Buenos Aires is 80% of the GDP of Argentina. If the metropolis doesn't work, the country doesn't work. But even in India, the metropolis, I did a calculation, I might be 10% wrong, but India's 6 main metropolis is 50% of the GDP of India. And I was told this at lunchtime, a figure that works like that. So if the Indian metropolis don't work, India does not work. No? And you will not have the position in the world that you owe, that you should have. No? And proof of that is that, for instance, Madrid is equivalent to Peru. Madrid on its own is equivalent to Peru. Los Angeles, San Diego is equivalent to Spain. Argentina is equivalent to Dallas. I say that in Argentina, and they told me, if you say that again in Argentina, we don't invite you anymore because we hate the Americans and we don't want to be Dallas. We want to be America. Yeah. Paris is 3 times Colombia, etc., etc., etc. So do not think in terms of nations, think in terms of metropolis. I am very politically incorrect. No? I'm going to say something which is politically incorrect. Nations is an invention of 200 years. No? And the proof that it's an invention of 200 years, it was an invention of, well, the main inventor was Goethe, the German, but it was invented by the French Revolution. And the proof that it's an invention of 200 years is that the French invented a flag, which is 3 colors in vertical, and since then, all the flags on the world are 3 colors, vertical or horizontal. No? But they are all after the French Revolution, after the French flag. There are only the British with the Union Jack and the Americans, 10 years before the French, that are different. And then some African countries that have, no, but all the flags are after the French Revolution, and before that it was just kingdoms. India was not India, it was Ashok, the kingdom of Ashok, or the kingdom of the Moguls, or whatever, no? And we have invented the concept of nations. So, and it's only 200 years. And 200 years in a history of the Mahabharata of 12,000 years is nothing, no? So we really are evolving the governance of the world, and the metropolis have to take much more importance. But in a country like, the Philippines, the president of the Philippines is never going to allow Manila to have political power, because Manila is 66% of the economy of the country. So if there is a mayor in Manila, the first thing the mayor will say, look, I am 66% and you are only 33, so go home because I want to take your place. So there are countries where that is going to be absolutely impossible for the metropolis to have political power. But there are other countries that it is very possible, and in fact there is already. And those countries are the ones where the metropolis is 5%, 6% of the GDP of each metropolis is 6%. For instance, Germany, Frankfurt is 6%. For instance, China, Shanghai is 6%. Italy, Rome is 6%, and so on and so on. In those countries, the president or the prime minister doesn't care, doesn't matter if the metropolis has power, and so there is no problem giving political power to. And think of a metropolis that, to make a metropolis work, all these sectors and all those decisions have to be integrated to be efficient. If you don't have that integration, you are not going to be efficient. And the proof that you need to have that integration under a political power is that one of the metropolises that is best known for working very well, not in democratic terms, but at least in economic and social terms, is Singapore. Why? Because Singapore is a metropolitan nation. And they take the decisions on taxes, on the health budget, and so on, and not just on housing. And so really the most, think about putting the metropolis, the mayors together, and adding them up. That's like making a Frankenstein, no? And we don't need a Frankenstein of a metropolis. We need a Vitruvius man, no? Perfectly integrated. So metropolis have to be integrated, and the only way. And Mumbai, I have been given new figures, so this is wrong. No? This is a few years ago. Mumbai is number 76 with $200 billion. Now it's 160, so it's wrong. But obviously, that figure gave me a very bad GDP per capita. That at lunchtime I was given new figures, a very bad GDP, but it's consistent with the next table that you will see. And obviously, it's crazy that Mumbai is in this position. Mumbai should be in this position. And really, we must develop the economy of Mumbai with added value products in that kind of approach that I mentioned before, and New Delhi further back. No? And India is at it. Now, Mumbai has the economy of Pakistan, but Mumbai should have the economy of Italy or even of India. And that is the way of really working with your metropolis in a sense of a national structure. That's the only way of dealing. Don't think about a city. India metropolis don't work well. And if India wants to be a world power, and it should be a world power because that's your role, to be a world power, obviously you are not going to be a world power with this kind of metropolis working. And this, I don't know where I took it, but India GDP per capita is around $2,000 per capita. And only Delhi is around 4,600 because obviously Delhi is the political power, and the political power always has more money than the others. No? But Mumbai, Chennai, and so on, they are in the same range as the GDP of India. Metropolis is concentration of investments, of infrastructures. Metropolis around the world work normally 30, 40, 50% better than the rest of the country. And if you work at the same level as the rest of the country, that means that you don't work. And that has to be improved, essentially improved. No? And obviously, I'm not going to get into that, how you make that work. That will take a long time, congestion and so on, but obviously you cannot take 2 hours and a half to go to your job, because that's 25% of the GDP of the metropolis goes into going to your job every morning and this afternoon. So that is the kind of thing that has to be solved. With those figures, I would love if you take those figures and you tell me, Pedro, you are wrong. These are not the figures. I don't remember where I took them, and the real figures, and then I will change my discourse and my message. But obviously, with these figures, the metropolis don't work, and India cannot work it. But it's not only the population, it's as well the GDP. These are the highest GDPs, and these are the lowest GDPs. No? So immediately, when you see the two maps together, where the population is and the lowest GDP, then you realize that where you, as a federal government, have to invest is in this area, far away from Mumbai. So that kind of social equity approach doesn't help Mumbai at all. You're saying yes, or you are up? All right. So these are the areas. If I were Modi, I will say, where is the maximum potential, first of social equity, second of growth, because if these areas remain at that low level, India cannot be the role that you have to play. Where should I invest? This will be the approach. I should invest in social equity and economic potential in the long term. And obviously, you are very far away of those areas, so this kind of policy doesn't work for you. You want Modi to invest in the places where there is already productivity, well, to make those places more efficient and to position India in the international world in the short term, not in the long term. I'm not criticizing Modi. Anyway, so this is what I was telling you before, no? The social justice, equity, the economic efficiency, the objectives, the dichotomy, the struggle, and the alternatives, and it's a political decision. It's not a technical one, no? And we are here, physical environment. Physical environment is the natural and the artificial. Is natural and urban. We are part of the environment. And then the institutional, the governance, no? These three guys fight each other, no? And these four guys there have to find the equilibrium of the stool. It's like a stool with 3 legs. And if one leg doesn't work, the stool falls. So this is the job of these guys. And when I'm saying governance, I'm not saying the government. I'm saying government, the private and the public sector in a dialogue of intelligence. So immediately, you see that this corridor has to be developed, the one to Calcutta and Chennai, the Assam corridor, because they are the ones that require more investment, and you immediately see that how to develop these corridors, you need a road corridor, a high-speed train corridor, freight airports, Calcutta Ganges container port, logistics centers every 250 kilometers, industrial zone, strategic education. The strategic education is because a metropolis is like a computer. You have the hardware and you have the software. The hardware is the computer and the software is us. We are the logiciel, as the French say, of the computer. What is worth in a computer is not the hardware. For $1,000, $2,000, you change your computer. What is worth in a computer is the logiciel of the computer, the programs and the data bank, from which we work every month and we get paid for it every month. And that is worth much more than $1,000. might be worth millions, depending on your work in society. So in a metropolis, what is not worth it, I'm sorry for us, the architect, is not the bricks and the mortar and the steel. That is nothing. What is worth in a metropolis is us, the logiciel, the data bank, the human resources, everything that we know, and the social resources, the programs. This is how we relate to each other to make that knowledge produce something positive for the metropolis. So architects, the bricks you are going to put are worthless. I'm being nasty. No, but I mean, if you have in a society social resources, you have the software, you can destroy the country, like Germany after Second World War, absolutely whitewashed, but you have the Germans that are the social resources, are the capital, the logiciel, and in 10 years, Germany was again the main country in Europe. No? You don't have software, like in Haiti, you have earthquake, Haiti is destroyed, there is no social resources, we can be investing in Haiti in the next 30 years, we will not be able to develop Haiti. The same thing happens in Chile. Chile has social resources, collective intelligence. In 1 week, you don't hear about the earthquake of Chile, which is much larger than the one in Haiti. An example of collective intelligence. In Chile, the schools fell down because of the earthquake. What they did is to take all the old school buses that were already in the graveyard because the engine did not work. They pulled the buses to the plot where the school was, and they started giving classes in the buses. That is collective intelligence. And the Germans as well. So what we built, architects, is worthless compared to the value of, and to increase that value, you need to have strategic education. You must know what kind of people you need and educate them to feed the software of the society of the metropolis. These are the end, the last. So, the role of India in the world, and we were talking at lunchtime about that. In the history of the world, there has been mainly six cultures. No? First, the animists, then you are 12,000 years old, then the Persians, not exactly, the Sumerians and the Babylons and so on, the Middle East, then China, then the Westerns, and then the Arabs, which is the most modern culture. And there was a seventh one, but we Spanish destroyed it. In Latin America, we are sorry. No, anyway, well, we did not destroy it. No, we have a fight. As a Spaniard, when I go to Latin America, because you Spaniards, you were so cruel and you killed so many Indians and so on. Indians from there. And I say no, because my grandparents stayed in Spain. It was your grandparent that stayed here and did that. So, so whenever I see a Latin American that has 50% of Spanish blood, I tell them, you are the one who fought. Mine stayed at home. Out of these six cultures of the world, the others are collateral and are mixed. For instance, China, that kind of thing, are mixed of the other cultures. In the next century, only 3 are going to be the important cultures of the world. Only 3. And those 3 is obviously the Western, that we are grandchildren of you, and as a matter of fact, our languages are Indo-European languages, so we have inherited from you, and China, which are extremely antagonized, because the Chinese philosophy, Lao Tse and Confucius, is the philosophy that the future is predetermined, you cannot do anything to change it, so what you have to do is comply with the mood, you have to comply with the process, and then acceptance of the government. The individual is submitted to the government, which is the one that represents the group, and that is the Chinese approach. The Western approach is completely different. The future is talk. Well, Krishna, the teachers are he says, well, the future is made, the karma and all that, but if you really understand, it's like the matrix in the film. If you really understand how the matrix works, how that future works, and you are intelligent enough, and you are purposeful and willful, you can change that future. No? And that small detail, no, that starts like Chinese philosophy and ends up like Western philosophy, puts you much closer to us than to the Chinese. So we are interested that you really become the third power of the world, because you will be closer to us than the Chinese, Charlie Danger. And so the future is going to be the three big powers in the world, but obviously not if your metropolis don't work, not if you are in $2,000 per capita. No? Western world is in $30,000 per capita. China now is in 12, but they will reach 25 in the next 17 years. So India must grow, and mainly in the metropolis. If the metropolis of India do not work, India will not work, and we need you. I am not saying this for your benefit. I'm saying that for my benefit. No? We need you to play the role of the balance between the two antagonistic powers. We are not going to get into a war. We are not going to fight because it will take 5 minutes. The world will be finished after 5 minutes. But it's going to be an ideological war of controlling Africa and controlling this and that and so on. So we really need you to become a third power, and that can only happen to metropolis. And for those metropolis to work, you have to have the physical dimension, and the physical dimension is your responsibility, architects. So your role in India and in the world for the next 70 years is essential. So I thank you for that. Thank you. So it was 1 hour and a half.